Hey everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Docs That Rock. And today, I'm your old pal, the Moo Cow, aka Paulie Presents, and I'm joined by
Jonathan Moody, your co-host.
And we are watching a movie from director Penelope Spheeris back way before Wayne's World, way before Flintstones and all that other stuff. Back where she was actually doing some good stuff. And it is The Decline of Western Civilization. The first one, the best one. Have you ever seen that?
There's a sequel?
Oh yeah, she did 3 of them.
Oh, okay.
This is the first one. This is the punk one that started it all off.
Never seen it.
Right before she did Suburbia, and she did kind of like the punk thing back in the 80s. No. It's a great movie. Great encapsulation of what was going on at the time. And I love it to bits, and I'm thrilled that it finally has come out in Blu-ray. So we're going to check it out, and we'll let you know what you guys thought, or what you thought.
What I thought.
Yeah, and we'll be back. Docs. Hey everybody, and we are back. Docs That Rock, and we are talking about The Decline of Western Civilization.
Western Civilization.
First one.
The
punk
first
years.
one. The punk years, right?
So this was your first time checking this out.
Yeah,
what did you think?
Real quick before I give my opinion. So there were 3.
There were 3.
There were 3. So there hasn't been any more after that, as far as, but there was. The first one was the punk scene.
Right.
Second one was the heavy metal scene. What was the third?
I forget what the third one was. I actually never saw the third one.
Okay, so, but all right. Well, this one came out. Did the other 2 come out on Blu-ray?
I believe so.
All right. Well, I really liked it. I thought it was. As I was explaining to Paul earlier, I'm sort of a different demographic. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, you know, and but like as a kid, you know, and everything. It didn't, you know, I graduated in 2000, so like, you know, I had 82 to 2000 that I was.
So
like,
for you, Penelope Spheeris meant Wayne's World.
Meant Wayne's World.
Which for me, Penelope Spheeris meant Decline of Western Civilization.
Which is so funny. We watched an interview with her after this
with Henry Rollins.
And she was talking about how she'll never, when she dies, nobody will remember her for Wayne's World. I was like, what? No, I'd always remember you from Wayne's World. Come on, you know. But I get it. Like, you know, this is your baby. You know, this is not. Those are what you paid the bills on or whatever,
right.
and made the money. But this is really what your love and blood and sweat and tears went into. So Penelope, if you watch this, we hope you do. We hope you do. But if you watch this. This is, you know, this was definitely our, you know, this was your love child.
And it was fabulous. I can't tell you how long I waited for it to come out in DVD. And then when I found out it was out on Blu-ray, I was delighted. And the great thing is, it comes with all this extra stuff on there. There are all these, you know, not just behind the scenes things, but like there are extended interviews with the bands. There's all kinds of really cool stuff. I liked a little bit with Henry Rollins there. And there's more things that I haven't even explored yet. So, yeah, that was just like super cool. You know, I saw this way back. I would have said it would have been either 1981 or 1982. I was in like sophomore year, maybe freshman year of high school. So 15, 16 years old. Okay. And this was one of the movies that was playing at the State Theater in Newark, Delaware. And I was already into the sort of the punk scene. I was mostly in the English side at that point. So it was mostly like the Clash and the Sex Pistols and that sort of thing. And I knew some of the American stuff, but this really got me into it. And of course, you know, this being late 79, early 80s was a little before my time, but getting to see it up on the big screen and at the time when I was 15, 16 years old blew me away. And I was like, oh my God, this is a great movie. I was totally into that scene, into the music, into the punk aesthetics, into the violence of it, frankly. Just the whole thing. And it spoke to me, and it just reached out and grabbed me, and it was my people. So this was always a big deal for me. And the fact that it was finally out is, absolutely fantastic. And so when I decided to talk about documentaries in this show, this was one of the movies I had in mind, because there are a lot of people out there who don't know this exists at all. Like yourself, they only know Penelope Spheeris from her later stuff in Hollywood.
I think, when I checked her IMDb out years ago, I saw Decline of Western Civilization and found out it was a documentary and stuff like that. And just had no interest at the time because I didn't really know anything about it, or whatnot. And I'm very glad you were able to show it to me because, I got to really get to know this,
And I had planned on doing Suburbia for Indie Film Cafe too, because that's a really good movie.
Is it an indie movie?
Oh yeah, it's definitely indie. It took place right after this film.
But that's one of the good ones, right?
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Because when we did, not you, I asked you, but you couldn't make it for Hollywood Knockbusters. We did the other Suburbia, which was the Richard Linklater slacker,
which is good
Clerks
too,
kind of.
But it's very different.
It's a very different Suburbia, definitely. Yeah. That was more, you said yours is like more punk stuff, and
definitely, and
whatnot, and
it's funny, she was talking about begging Henry Rollins to play the lead in the movie. That's cool because he was like the man in 1981, so. Yeah, that's funny.
Well, they made this, and then I'm sure after the success of this, or whatever, it going around, she was like, I'm really into the punk scene. Let me go actually make a full-length feature about it.
And nobody had really done a documentary on the American side of things. Like I said, there had been stuff on the English side, which is why I kind of knew it more than the American stuff.
Like Sex Pistols?
Yeah, and the Clash and stuff like that. Like the Clash had Roadie and Rude Boy, rather. It was about the Roadie. And there were a few other things that were out there, but nobody had really explored the American side. And so in an indie side, an underground sense, this became kind of a big deal. And a lot of people in Hollywood were like, oh, wow, this is cool. And because it was very skillfully done, because it weaves a lot of the footage of different bands performing different concerts along with interviews, and along with not only interviews of the band, but interviews of the people who watch the bands, and then the promoters and even the security. And it just kind of presents this whole world about what the LA punk scene it was at the time in LA. It just helps create this world in which nowadays you look back and it's like a moment trapped in time, because it's it's a world that has come and gone. All those clubs are gone. Some of the bands are still around, but most of the people in them are either dead or gone. It's just, that was, 1980. So we're talking 42 years ago. Yeah, it's amazing. So, it's like a little insect trapped in amber, and it's just tremendous. And yet the music is great, still hard-hitting. The footage is really good. I thought her skillful editing was fabulous, and it's fun to be able to see the background for all these folks and then allow them to talk. Like, you get a really good sense of Darby Crash. Like, Darby Crash is kind of like a legend in the punk scene, but you get to see him talking and just sort of being himself and expressing himself.
I might have been a little harsh, but I was like, I thought, I know a lot of it's the drugs that he was on or whatever.
Drinking,
but he really did seem like he was a little bit autistic or something. Like
it's possible.
He might have been on the spectrum or so, but but that didn't stop him from creating great songs. And, and being a fantastic singer. But it was just seemed like he was a little, I don't know. Not dumb, but just
the thing about it is the punk scene in the early days especially was like the island of misfit toys. That's where the rest of us who didn't fit in with the world and with society went, because we weren't with the cool kids, who were, doing cocaine and listening to the Eagles and, and Led Zeppelin and all that. And we weren't like that. We wanted something completely different. We were against all that other stuff.
And now for something completely different.
Right. So, it was pretty interesting. So I liked being able to see that. Same thing with X. You got to see, especially because there was a lot more footage of X, because at the time, X was, of all of them, was probably the biggest deal back then. So,
are you saying that X marked the spot?
Yes, they did. Well, certainly for that one kid who cut his head.
Yeah,
Cut
because
his
said
hair
like
like that.
X. Yeah, because he said he was an X head. I was like, that is funny.
And and I tell people, especially some of the younger kids, and they just don't understand. I tell them, it was illegal in a lot of places to play punk rock music, and they're like, no, you don't really. I'm like, no, really. If a band went up there and somebody called the police, they would arrest you for that. That's how bad things were in the early Reagan years. I mean, it was.
They were trying to silence them.
Yes, they were, and there was a lot of violence associated. There was a lot of fighting associated. One thing I can tell you is it was different as usual. It's different in America. In England, generally speaking, there was that kind of stuff going on at shows too, but it was different. I remember somebody when I was in London was telling me this is the first time I was there. They said, if you were at a punk show in London and during the original group, like when the Sex Pistols and Clash and all that, if you were at a club and you fell, people just kind of helped you up and you got back into listening to music. It's a very different situation. You fell in Philly or in New York City or in LA, you probably got stomped on. So it was a little bit of a different. There was a little more violence associated with that, but you kind of expected that. So like even Henry Rollins was talking about how you can go to a show and end up getting an injury or getting into a fight. Well, that's the thing that happened. It was a time to sort of let all of that out. It was assumed that that's what was going to happen.
I like the one kid talking about that.
Right.
Like he got all his aggression out, but then it was so funny. He couldn't explain his aggression.
Yeah, he's a little kid.
Does he need to have aggression? What did he have aggression to? Like his parents telling him he had to do the chores? Like he really didn't have. Because he walked outside and he said, the buses.
Just living in the environment.
Yeah, living in the environment. Like what? That's not.
This was before LA got kind of cleaned up and it was just like smoggy and polluted and just.
So this is
awful.
all the LA scene, right?
Yeah, this is all LA. And it was just a different time. Like Hollywood Boulevard, that was a dump, man. It was just an ugly, awful place, like Skid Row. I mean, it's all gentrified now and expensive now, but back then in the 70s and 80s, that was like the dirtiest, nastiest, most dangerous part of LA.
I don't know. From what I've understood, Hollywood Boulevard and all that area, that Hollywood itself is dirty, disgusting.
Yeah.
And not a good place to live. It's very cheap and it's very cheap for a reason because like homeless people are there and it's still not
even back in the Ray Dennis Steckler era. You could see he was shooting in those areas and you could see stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely a thing, and that's where a lot of independent bands and small bands or early bands would go and play because that's where you would be able to go. So yeah, it's really interesting. And of course, a lot of these bands like X became really, really big, and Circle Jerks became sort of big, and Black Flag
is big,
kind of big. So seeing them way back in the day, seeing how young they were was pretty amazing.
Let's talk about. I love that they explored where Black Flag slept.
Yeah,
and everything, and how kind of they slept in a was it a church or something?
It's an old burned out church.
Yeah, so it's an old burned out church. They paid $16
$16 a month,
and for all of them to live there. I don't think each of them had to pay $16.
Right, there was like a main room, and then Ron Reyes was in a closet.
He was in a closet. And somebody was up.
Robo was up on top.
And they were like, "That's a bed up there."
Yeah, and that's just it. We all know there's a homeless problem in LA, and some of these guys who were in bands that they were half a step away from being homeless.
Yeah.
And so that's what they were doing, and they were earning money and or just food.
So I'm gonna bring this up again for us that we haven't discussed on the show, but like I was listening to one of our IFC episodes, and we're talking about this movie Miami Connection, and there was a band called Dragon Sound, and they were talking about how they're going to go on tour and how they have this nice place with all these people. And in our discussion, Paul and James L. Edwards brought up the fact that it makes no sense that somebody who's getting paid probably maybe $200 now.
The band, not just one person. The whole band
Yeah.
was probably getting that.
Yeah, getting $200 would be able to afford a place where like 5 people can actually sleep. That's not like a dingy like church, like abandoned church
Or
or
Roach
whatever.
Motel.
Or Roach Motel. And so when we watched this thing, they asked him, how can you afford this? And they were like, we pretty much can't. We pretty much, it's negative.
Yeah, we don't earn money. We
don't
lose
earn
money.
it. We lose money on this stuff because most of it goes back into marketing and getting people to like buy our CDs or whatever,
Promotion.
promotion and everything.
Even X, I mean, they were the most, popular ones and the one who made it most. I mean, they said, well, we're not rich, but we had enough to buy, ink and
Pens.
to make tattoos and
Yeah.
I mean, they were probably living week to week. I mean, that's just the way it was back then. You know?
I mean, you have to do what you have to do for your art,
And they weren't there to be rock and roll stars. They were trying to be the anti rock and roll stars. That's the whole point of it, So, but what comes with that is you're living hand to mouth, and you're living in closets, and you're buying stuff from thrift stores, and you're living the what we used to call the real life, this is what reality was for the vast majority of people. It wasn't drinking Chivas Real like with the Rolling Stones and your $45 million mansion someplace. That's nobody does that except for extremely few people.
Extremely few people are that lucky, but everybody else, they're lucky if they're able to do what they love to do,
right?
And not have to get like another job and if you're actually like living it and you're doing it every day or whatever, you're sacrificing your life, that's amazing.
They're being themselves. They're not worried about what other people think about them. They don't worry about being canceled. No,
that band should be called No Fear.
Yeah, No Fear. Fearless.
Fearless.
Yeah, no, they're just gonna be who they are. They're gonna have integrity. I mean, this, I always talk about that on the show. That's the punk ethics that I subscribe to. That's been part of my life the whole time. I'm gonna be who I am, and if you like me, that's great. If you don't, that ain't my problem. That's your problem.
No,
yeah.
I mean, which is sort of the stuff that they have in this movie. Is they talk about that is basically like they don't care. I mean, even freaking Fear had a song called "I Don't Care About You."
Right. And I love how Rollins ends up talking to her about that, and how Penelope Spheeris is like, the working on these documentaries, especially the punk one, really changed her life and changed her outlook, and now she's applied a lot of those, that ethos to her life, and she's
philosophy.
And she's like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and it's okay if you don't like it, but I'm gonna do it anyway because this is my life, and you want something else, you go do that.
So she also talked about how she, on this interview, how she had basically got, when she did Wayne's World, like nobody else wanted it or something.
Right.
So she kind of got into it and stuff. And
she
did
lucked
it.
out into it.
And then all of a sudden she did comedies. That's all she got.
That's all they gave her.
And so then she did like, I forgot what other ones.
She did the Flintstones. She did Little Rascals.
And she did a couple. Yeah. And then she was at Burning Man, and somebody slipped her some X in in her beer, and she goes off, and she has a really bad trip, I guess, or whatever. Wakes up from it, going, I don't want to do studio films anymore, and she went and Western Civilization 3.
Yeah, and did some other stuff, which is great.
And that to me was great to hear because, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie, Penelope, I miss you in the studio films. You are really good at comedy. But if it wasn't making you happy and you really want to do what you want to do, God bless you, because you're going to make stuff like this. I'm 100%
right, and that's the way of the world. There is making money, and then there is being happy, and the two things aren't necessary. If you're lucky, you get to have both. Most people don't get that.
Yeah, if I end up directing or producing movies that I want to produce, or whatever, but it doesn't sometimes work that way. Like Quentin Tarantino, the first job he got was being an usher in a movie theater. but it was a porno movie theater, and he has no interest in porno stuff or whatever. So like, like sometimes you don't get exactly what you want to get, or what you dream of getting. You get, a side version of that.
Right.
And she got to do her, it's love.
It's the reason, I do archaeology now, whereas a lot of my friends from high school, or others, they chose things like business simply because that's where the money was. And I could have gone down that route too. In fact, I know it was expected of me sometimes, but I had zero interest in that. I didn't care about business. I didn't care about money. I wanted to do something that fulfilled me, and that has been sort of reflective in my life. And to me, I would rather live a life where I'm happy than a life where I'm making a ton of money, because money can't buy happiness. I mean, it can buy you contentment maybe, and it can buy you stuff, but
buy you stuff.
Stuff doesn't make you happy. It really doesn't. So it's more like experiences and people and relationships. That's what makes you happy.
And the stuff that you love and enjoy doing. So many people just get stuck doing something because that's just what they were doing. That they gotta, like, I tell some of my friends, are you happy doing what you're doing? Because if you're not happy doing what you're doing, maybe you should find what makes you happy. And
there's a lot of discussion about posers and what that's a punk term. Every person's a poser. A lot of people would get into the music business as posers because they pretend to be these sort of rock and roll people, when the fact is it's just an easy road. They think it's an easy road to make money, and that's why they're doing it. It's not like Darby Crash or some of these other guys who really, they're into it because they don't fit anywhere else. They have nothing else that they can do. They're sort of down at the bottom, going through the lint basket, and this is all they've got. And so they're being their true selves because they have no choice. That's a different situation than someone's like, oh, I'm going to be a rock star. Come on. No.
I think it's funny to sort of see the guys too that that I recognize from like the movies and stuff. Like we got John Doe,
Leaving
was in fucking Clue, and that's one of my favorite films. And that was in the '80s, so he was still sort of a younger person.
There was a lot of cross-pollination between the indie music scene and the indie film scene. So those folks knew each other, they used each other, and it was great. I mean, that's the great thing about LA, is that because it brings in a lot of people with different kinds of talent, not everybody works for the man. There's a lot of independent people out there, and they will all get to know each other and work with each other.
I think with the assertion of Clue is that, I bet Jonathan Lim was a fan of Fear, and was like, hey, Lee, come on,
or
act in this,
knew them.
or at least knew him from, parties or just, whatever.
And of course, Fear is infamous for the Saturday Night Live debut that they made that pretty much just about caused a riot and made Lorne Michael lose his shit. And he was like, it was John Belushi's favorite band at the time, and he talked them into getting him on, and they were themselves. And Lorne Michaels had no idea who they were, no idea what they were going to do, and they said, oh, they'll never be on TV. They're banned from Saturday Night Live, and they'll never show this episode ever again.
It's the same thing with like Andy Kaufman. Funny. He got sort of banned from Saturday Night Live. He was not allowed to come back on there or whatever, and just because you just can't trust these people. If they're gonna, especially when it's a live show, you gotta be able to trust that the person's not gonna like start cursing on the stage or whatever, because or if they are, that maybe they're gonna be bleeped out, but like really they don't want that because it's a family show.
It's great because it shows you how the punk scene was. That's where a lot of early feminism was, where a lot of early just inclusion was. You would see a lot of different people from different races and different backgrounds together. There was a lot of LGBTQ people there. There was a lot of acceptance in the punk world long before it became a thing, and long before the mainstream was.
Whatever was it, Lee or whoever was in Fear was telling, was calling out homosexuals and saying "fuck you" and
Yeah,
doing all that stuff.
that's because they were baiting the audience. That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
They were trying to piss them off. That was part of Fear's show.
Yeah.
Was to actually cause riots and cause problems, is because that's what they did.
And that girl got on the stage and started fighting them, and then got kicked in the face.
There was a lot of fights. I went to a couple of punk shows in high school. None of the great big bands, but there was always something going off there, and you knew that's why a lot of these people went there, because that was just sort of an excuse, because you was expected. And when you end up with drugs or alcohol, and loud, fast music, it's gonna amplify it. So,
yeah, you were saying too, like,
totally different now. You can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you were back there doing the stuff, and they were talking about pogo dancing, which is just basically jumping up and down or whatever, and. And
or
whatnot.
The worm, that was the other one. The idea is that all kinds of broken glass and shit on the ground, so you get on the ground and you writhe around in it. The worm.
That doesn't sound like fun to me.
No, it wasn't there to be fun. It was there to show people how tough you were. And
once again, it doesn't sound like something I would want to do.
Pain was like the idea was that if you did self-harm, that you could expel a lot of stuff. Like I said, the early Reagan eras were tough for a lot of people, and this was just the way that they could get rid of a lot of pent-up emotions and aggression and stuff like that, and you really didn't have an outlet for this sort of thing. And the music scene at the time was not the place. That was like the old boomer hippie kind of stuff, and traditional rock and roll, and mainstream rock and roll, and it just wasn't appealing to us. I mean, I got sick of commercial radio back in, I guess, would have been like 81, 82. And I haven't listened to it since, because I knew that commercial radio doesn't exist to provide you with good, fun music. Commercial radio exists to sell you shit that you don't need. And it just uses music to sort of trap you in there. So, and they weren't playing anything that I wanted to hear anyway. So I gave up on that a long time ago. And the places like the State Theater were showing, that's where I got to see a lot of the movies that we saw, Forbidden Zone, and John Waters, and all that kind of stuff.
Pink Flamingo.
So there was a lot of interplay between, like I said, independent cinema and independent music, and it was the place, theater especially, because you would get live bands there on occasion, and it was usually the little bands that nobody heard of. And it was just a great time and a great place, you don't get that anymore. It's that whole scene's gone.
Yeah, this has commentary, by the way. I
didn't see it.
But I'm guessing it's in the audio section. So, commentary with Penelope Spheeris. So
I'd love to see it, because I would love to see her go back somehow and see if she could find some of the people that she interviewed. Like, I know she could find Pat Smear, because Pat Smear is still around. I think he's even still playing with Nirvana. Some of them are not around anymore. Like that guy Eugene, with the little guy with the shaved head, I would love to find out what happened to him, and how 40 years down the road, what he thinks and where he's at and what's going on. Or the guy with the X shaved in his head, or the girl who talked about, she was all the makeup and had blue hair. She's like, everybody should have blue hair. Which I thought was adorable.
I know. Was that Jennifer?
Little punk princess.
With like the PHER. Yeah. It's cute. I mean, all the people are very cute. I like them. I like
they were that characters, idea. Right?
Yeah, they were people. They were raw. They were real. You could tell like this wasn't a written thing or anything. This was like off the cuff. Like the security guards they interviewed. The magazine editors that
I love the older club owners, and they're like they don't quite understand what's going on. It's all sort of new to them, and they're trying to figure it out, but they're like, but they're nice kids. It's like, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But until the cops get called.
Yeah, until the cops get called.
But aside from that, I don't know. Like, and if I had been told before that the cops would get called on a punk scene, I would have probably said, yeah, that sounds about right, because. Back then especially, that it was probably like almost like protesting, and
sure.
stuff, and nowadays, punk is just seen as just music, you know, and a lot of times they don't have like a real political message to it. It's just entertainment, you know, and everything, and that's fine. But this was not that back then. This had,
is different.
everything had a, you know, everything
I mean,
had a.
it still exists, but you know, it's 40 years later, 50 years later in some instances. If you go back to, you know, the original scene,
the 70s.
So yeah, it's not quite the same, but there are things that are out there. But it's a different world now. It's an online world. It's a digital world. It's a, you know,
so how are you gonna sing songs about the digital world? Ugh.
I know.
You know, it won't like sit well because.
But a lot of the same problems are still there. You know, problems with police, problems with pollution, problems with the government, problems with society. That stuff hasn't changed. It's just the way that you go about expressing your dissatisfaction with them.
Yeah, it's more about communication. It's easier for everybody to communicate with everybody now. You know, if Black Flag wants to start wants to start on X, the Twitter, former Twitter, now called X.
Right.
I don't think Elon Musk got it from this.
Yeah, it's amazing because something like Black Flag, there had been social media, they would have blown up. Everybody would have known them. They would have been huge.
YouTube. They would have been on TikTok. They would have been on.
Yeah, they would not have labored in obscurity for a long time. Especially some of these other bands. You know, Alice Bag Band is a great band. Should have been a lot more famous.
Yeah, you have a crush on Alice.
Oh, I had a huge crush on Alice Bag. Still do. She's awesome.
Yeah. So there you go. But no, I mean that's the thing. Like back then you didn't have all of these tools that you have now with technology. That they just had their guitars and they just had, you know, a place to play, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And if they were lucky, they were able to sell CDs that they made probably, you know,
tapes. They actually would sell tapes back then.
Sell tapes back then, whatever, and that would cost them the money, and then they would be lucky if they got a meal that day, you know.
So I do want to talk a little bit about Penelope Spheeris and her choices in the documentary. I noticed she's very different than, say, an Earl Morris or some of the other folks who you don't notice them. You know, like you see the subject matter and the subject matter only. Penelope, you hear her. She's off camera. She's asking leading questions. She's getting people to do things. She's a lot more involved in the documentary, and I wondered what you thought about that.
That was cool. Like, I mean, you know, Michael Moore does that too. You know, like there are people who do. I don't know. It just, to me, it didn't, like, because I'm so used to all these other people who probably came after her. You know, as far as documentaries, I'm just used to that. That doesn't, like, her doing that just seemed normal to me. You know?
Yeah, it's a different school of thought. There is that one school of thought that says if you're doing a documentary, it should only be about the subject matter.
American Movie. The director did not ever talk.
That movie. Right.
They never talked. There's two directors. They never talked. It was always, you know. But then you see this. You see Michael Moore. You see a lot of other people who do talk and do get involved because it's about. I mean, it sounds terrible, but it's about them telling the story,
right,
and everything. It's Penelope Spheeris's documentary.
The other style, which we saw in Darkon, where the director of Darkon doesn't necessarily get involved in his voice. You don't hear anything, but there are definitely scenes where he's created something that isn't there. Where he said, "Can I get all of the dark elves to do this for me, and we'll put it in the movie, or if I can get you to say this speech."
Yeah, he directed.
Right, and put that in there. Whereas this is more along the lines of, she didn't set anything up other than maybe the interviews. Otherwise, she just let stuff roll.
Yeah.
And
she
the people were
else.
So you're getting to see things like, you know, Exene Cervenka is just like, she's like laying on the floor, she's got hiccups. So you can't understand her half the time. Darby Crash is drunk as fuck sometimes.
Stumbling on stage.
Yeah.
And he would say, like, apparently he would say, "Give me more beer."
Yeah, give me a beer.
Give me a beer. And then everybody would just give him a beer.
Yeah. So she kind of, she might be there talking to them and interjecting every now and again, but at the same time, she's also allowing the subject matter to be themselves.
I did love that she asked him what drugs he was on.
Anything.
And he goes, well, I started on this, then I went to that, then I went to that, then eventually I got to my beer, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, how can you sing? And he sang, like, he he seemed to know words,
Yeah, well, that was the thing, poor Darby. I mean, he obviously he definitely had problems with that, but
and he passed away.
And he didn't really want necessarily to do what he was doing, but he was doing it because I don't know that he had much of a choice. But like he didn't like singing into the microphone, and she was talking about how they had the biggest problem trying to get him to just sing into the microphone, which you would think is a normal thing, but not for him because he didn't really like it, and he would say he just didn't want to pay attention to it.
At one point, the microphone like messed up or something.
Yeah, and it's like on the ground, and the roadie's off stage going, Darby, pick up the mic, and he's like looking at it. He's like, pick up the mic. It was funny.
There's a lot of good scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
it was really well done. I liked it,
mm.
And I think it's something that eventually, because I love Shout Factory. You put it out, and it's one of those things I'll probably buy at some point.
So I'm probably, I don't know if it's going to be the next one or one down the road, but I want to do a movie called Erg, A Music of War, which comes out about a year later. It has some of the punk stuff in there, but it also has the new wave as well.
Which we heard.
Claude Bessie describing as no such thing as new wave.
And then he sang like a song that was very new wave.
New wave-ish, right.
I know. I was like, ew.
But, it's got like the Police in there, and this was at the time when the Police were like the biggest band on the planet.
Which one's Claude? Which band was he in?
Catholic Discipline.
Oh, yeah. That's the one you aren't as,
Yeah, musically they were kind of meh.
They were my least favorite of the groups. But, yeah, my favorite was probably X. Next would probably, I love Fear. I really did. I think they were crazy. And then I really, really dug Black Flag. Circle Jerks were cool, but I don't know if I really got enough of them or their stuff, then I got to really get to.
And this was the pre-Rollins Black Flag too.
Black Flag, yeah. It was Ron Reyes.
Yeah, it was they had their original singer, I forget his name, and then Ron Reyes came in and he was in there for a short time. And then he had other stuff going on, so he was out. And then Henry Rollins came in, and Rollins was in it for a long time. And then Ron Reyes actually came back to the band for a while, and this was later on, and that was kind of cool having him in there. But I don't know that he's in there now, and I'm not sure what the status is for Black Flag at this point. I know Rollins is, he had his own band for a while, and he's kind of doing other things now. He does a lot of stuff on YouTube and such.
Yeah, he has interviews and things.
Yeah,
like we saw.
I don't know that the Circle Jerks are necessarily around, although certainly some of the people there are still around. X, at least John Joe and Exene Cervenka are still around, and I think if they're around, Billy Zoom is probably not far away. So, but I don't know that they're playing anywhere. I haven't seen them play or put out any albums. Alice Bagg is still a performer. She's more of an artist, though, so she kind of does things on her own. Let's see. Gosh, yeah, Catholic Discipline was, like I said, it was more of a house band, so it was members from other band plus people from the Slash magazine.
I liked how they described how they got their name was from, like, a graffiti on a
it was a very Claude Bessie thing.
Yeah, in a bathroom. He came in there, he saw Catholic Discipline, so he thought
that'd be cool name for a band.
A cool name for a band, which is kind of funny. I mean, whoever came up with that, you got it. You got that band title.
I love how, as an editor, he would be writing stuff, and he's like, I don't care. I hope people hate me. I really want them, because if they're not hating me, then I'm not doing my job.
Who said that?
Claude Bessie.
Oh, Claude Bessie. Wow.
Yeah. He was a good guy. I liked him. And another one who's just, integrity. He's going to say what he's going to say. He's going to be who he's going to be, and that's it.
Seems to be like the theme of all of them.
Yeah, the punk ethos was to be true to yourself no matter what you are, and then the DIY, do it yourself. Don't wait around and hope that someday you'll be in a big rock and roll band. Pick up the fucking guitar and figure it out. Play it yourself, you know. And those are two of the main ethos there. And then just, you know, accept everybody for who they are. You know, don't be a poser. Don't be an asshole. You know, don't be the cops. You know, because they're hypocrites. You know, people
Shut
had
you
problems
down.
with them then. You know, had problems back then, much less now. So yeah, it was a really, really cool, you know, encapsulation of the period of the time, and good music too.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you kind of grooving a little bit to some of the
I
songs.
was liking it. I was digging it.
Second wave. It's not the first wave. It's not the original wave of punk. It's not
Ramones.
or the Clash or the Sex Pistols. You know,
yeah.
the second wave, especially the American hardcore version of punk, was a little bit more political, a lot faster, and in a certain sense, a little angry and a little bit more, I don't know, destructive. But that's just how it was.
I'm wondering what heavy metal bands they pick for the
I forget.
sequel.
I never really looked into it because I really wasn't into that kind of heavy metal. There was some underground stuff I liked, but I think it was more mainstream heavy metal.
Really?
I think so, as I recall.
Oh.
But or
like Metallica?
no, it's more like hair metal.
Oh,
know,
Guns N' Roses?
That kind of stuff,
Oh.
or Rat, or you know, some or poser metal. From what I remember, I don't know.
I never even consider that metal, like the heavy, the hair metal.
Hairy chest and
Like,
spandex music.
I consider that to be like pop, you know, music.
Pretty much.
And stuff,
Pretty
so,
much.
Yeah.
And I don't recall what the third one was. I don't remember.
We'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
My memory's not so good.
But
I pogoed a little too much when I was a kid.
yeah, but the you can buy this, you know,
Shout Factory.
put this out so you can buy the movie out there. I suggest you do that. Once again, I had no idea really what I was getting myself into when I was watching it, but very happy I did because
it'll be very interesting when we do Erga Music War and how the crossover between the two are. I'm dying to see what your reaction is there because there's going to be a few more bands in there that you know versus bands like in this one. So
right.
Especially because like you know Oingo Boingo's in there, so our boy Danny Elfman.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, and other.
Oingo Boingo wasn't punk though. So
no, but that's
wave.
what I'm saying. This was a mix, you know. So like the Go-Go's are in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they weren't punk either, but they were in that period. So there was a sort of fight going on between, you know, punk versus new wave and blah 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 blah. I mean, I kind of liked both. I was really more of a post-punk fan. That was really my favorite thing, which is not really represented. Some of them are in Erg though, so I'll point that out. So it's nice because the early 80s you got a real dynamic for all the very, very different kinds of musical versions of underground music that was out there. It's just sort of a flowering that hasn't really happened here. Now rock and roll is very much second class to hip-hop and rap, and you're not seeing different kinds of rock and roll anymore. It's just kind of a spent force. You know, it still exists and it's still okay. It's just it's not what it was culturally speaking.
Yeah, and I don't think it ever will get back to that.
Probably not, and that's okay.
You know,
it's all right.
It's just, I hate to say it, but when you pass on, you know, like, and that generation passes on, it's done, then there's going to be all these other new generations that are just going to be doing other stuff, and they'll like that for a while. Then they'll call that classic rock,
right? And you know, rap and hip hop will be on the decline, and something else will.
I don't think rap.
Something else will come along the line.
They've said rap and hip hop are going to die in the '80s, and that never happened.
And they said rock and roll would live forever, and it doesn't.
It sort of. I mean, it's still there. It's just a different.
It's who. I'll tell you what's going to happen. Whatever the man can make money off of, that's going to be the next big thing. So.
Yeah, whatever gets popular, but it has to start with somebody doing something different. It could be
Screaming Goats for all I know. Who knows?
If that was in Thor 4, so. I mean,
well, maybe Penelope Spheeris will do a documentary about Screaming Goats. Screaming Goat music taking over and becoming the next big cultural thing. It's probably going to be AI music or
I wonder
something.
if they'll do a part 4 for Western Civilization.
I don't know. I don't know what she's doing lately. You know, I don't know. I'm very curious. I know she's done a few other things. I just don't know what that is. I don't know if she has plans to do a fourth civilization, Western civilization. I don't know.
We'll find out someday.
But in the meantime, if you get the chance to check it out, if you're looking for an interesting documentary, if you're looking for something that sort of talks about that period.
A doc that rocks.
A doc that rocks.
I mean, this literally rocks.
Oh, yeah. 300 beats per minute. Check it out. You go to Shout Factory. You could probably get it at Uncle Amazon. It's out there. Check it out.
eBay. Whatever way you can get it. I'm sorry. Shout Factory probably is the best place to get it.
Yeah,
shoutfactory.com.
that's where I got mine.
You know. So thank you guys for checking this out.
Yep.
Hope you guys enjoyed it, and join us next month for whatever craziness Paul has in store. It might be the next
episode of Docs That Rock. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Docs. I'm eating some pizza because I'm punk. Hey.
Oh.
Product placement.
Product placement on this.
Oh, is it on?
Yep.
All right. Well,